Hello, welcome to Spotlight, a rainbow of talent on an emerald isle.
Spotlight, brought to you by the Isle of Man Arts Council.
Tonight, we hear from journalist and author Shirley Mann on her latest book based here on the Isle of Man. Catch up with a new venture for the Douglas Choral Union and get poetical with this year's Poetry Trail and our latest poem from youth bard Eva Petrova. As always, do get in touch with any creative, artistic endeavours you may be involved in, planning, hoping to create, or would really like to, yes, put in the spotlight. Be they poetic, visual, theatrical, musical, literary, mime, drag, you name it. Just email me spotlight@manxradio.com or, of course, howardkane@manxradio.com. They both cost the same, so take your pick. Let's start with a cracking story set here on the Isle of Man, though you might have to wait a little bit for this one. Bridget's War is about a woman police officer who was put in charge of the Russian internment camp during the last war. It's an inspiring and uplifting tale of the strength of women during the war, and whilst a fictional saga, the story itself is based on reality and unsung heroes whose stories, their bravery and sacrifices have often been overlooked or ignored for the many decades since the end of the last war. Well, to find out more about this new book, I spoke to its author, Shirley Mann.
It was a strange journey, really, because I've been a journalist all my life, and they say everybody's got a book in them. And I sort of had this feeling. I wondered whether I could write a novel. And my mother had talked for many years about her time in the WAF and how much she'd enjoyed it, and actually had had a really good time despite all the horrors, etc. And I suddenly thought, when she was getting older, and anybody who's got elderly parents, it's very difficult when they get older to remember what they were like when they were young. And my dad had died at 66. So I thought, I wonder if I could rediscover these two. So I thought, well, I'll have a go at writing a novel and see whether it works. Well, it took me 6 years and a tortuous journey. I can't tell you. I kept putting it away, thinking, I can't do this. And I went on every course, because to turn from writing facts, which is what I'd always done as a journalist, I was a conduit for other people's facts and feelings. All of a sudden, I could make it up. And I can't tell you how hard that was. I found that really difficult. Anyway, I wrote the thing, and I was very lucky to find an agent quite quickly and a publisher quite quickly. But I didn't know that I'd written a saga. That was a strange thing to me, because the saga, to me, the only saga I knew of was the sort of Forsyte saga thing. So I wasn't really familiar with the genre. And basically, it's an ongoing thread within books. So that meant that I then had to write something that linked in with the first book, which is Lily's War, to make a saga out of it. And what I've done is I've just picked characters or an incident or something like that and developed it as a separate book.
And so is this basically using fictionalised stories of characters but within real settings and real events?
Yes, well, what I did was I realised I'd left it too late to ask my mum enough questions. So I raced around the country to talk to service women to get their anecdotes and their stories. Because, yes, you're right. And as a journalist, I'm so terrified of getting anything wrong, because in a previous life, if I got things wrong, I was in court for libel. So I am quite paranoid about that. And I wanted to make sure that the things that I talk about could happen. So I raced around and I met some amazing women, and all of a sudden what became a personal journey for me became a need to tell their legacy and a need to tell people what these very young girls from cities were suddenly thrust into, and the worlds that they had to cope with. And I feel a real duty to share those stories.
And there were some wonderful stories. Again, the ATA pilots, just the work that women were doing during the war, and really were never recognised for doing this. There's a sort of almost a a double-edged sword here, isn't it? It's a case of a romantic novel, but also getting out these facts and perhaps giving some recognition to just what so many women did do during the war, which never was really properly recognised.
I couldn't agree more. And that was so important to me because once I found about the ATA, the Air Transport Auxiliary, I was very lucky to be able to meet Mary Ellis, who was the last surviving ATA pilot. And she actually allowed me to go and see her. And it was only about 8 weeks before she died at the age of 101. And she was incredible. I mean, she answered the door to me, and I got wet on the way there, and I'd got lost, and I looked like a drowned rat appearing at her doorstep. You know, some professional author I was. And she looked absolutely immaculate in a pair of navy slacks and a white shirt. And she ushered me into her conservatory, and where I met her lovely niece, Rosemary, who I'm still in touch with. And she was just incredible. I mean, it was like meeting the head girl. I was in awe. This woman had flown over 100 different planes, and she would race across the tarmac on impossible timescales, looking at how a tiger moth worked in high winds. I mean, they were just amazing.
So tell us about your latest one, because this brings you to the Isle of Man and the Russian camp. How did the inspiration come up for this?
Oh, the lovely Isle of Man. I have such a history with the Isle of Man because my parents actually lived there. They're both buried there. They lived there for the last 8 years of my father's life. So I was backwards and forwards all the time. And I have to say, fell in love. I really did. I thought seriously about moving over there. And I was working in radio at the time. And I thought, could I work for Manx Radio? And
I think there's always a job for you here.
Oh, thank you. That's really kind. And I just loved it. And I thought when I went over to see a friend of mine over there, and she took me to the Manx Museum, and I saw the books about the internment camp, and I thought, oh, this is somewhere I haven't been. A bit like the ATA pilots in my head. I knew nothing about them. And I thought, if I know nothing about them, I'm darn sure there are a lot of people out there who don't. And again, I wanted to bring that story to life. So I just thought, I have to write this one. There was no choice in it. And I've been so lucky. People on the island have been absolutely fabulous with offering their help. I can't tell you. I mean, there's Charles Farrer, whose mother was a woman police officer, and I've got people from the Manx Museum. I've had people from the Russian Trust. People have just been fabulous, really so helpful. I can't tell you.
And again, from what you're saying there, meticulously researched again.
Oh yes, but it is causing me endless trouble. I mean, I have to stretch things and to make them work in a fictional context. And I'm terrified. I'm terrified the island is going to go, oh, I don't think they'd have done that, So I'm checking and rechecking, and then I'm going to send it off to some pre-readers over there to ask them to check to make sure that the road from Ballasalla goes this way or whatever, just to make sure that everything is correct.
Yes, it can be an absolute minefield, can't it? Just the slightest thing can really irk a potential reader, I guess. So this is Bridget's War. As you say, what sort of timescale are we looking at then for its production and for people to actually be able to read the finished article?
It's going to be out next March. They are bringing out the ebook and the paperback and the audiobook at the same time. Next March, I think it will be now. And I'm just heavily into edits. In fact, that's what I've been doing this morning, going through things, checking everything and rechecking and rewriting. So lovely old Bridget, who is one of the policewomen who were at Russian camp, is having an amazing time at the moment. And I'm trying to make her come to life in a correct and fascinating way.
You'll have to wait a little for the book, though, Bridget's War. The book and ebook scheduled to be out, as Shirley mentioned there, next March. You can pre-order, I see, on Amazon already. And according to Mr. Amazon, it will be out on March the 9th. No pressure then, Shirley.
Spotlight, brought to you by the Isle of Man Arts Council.
Now, Douglas Choral Union are well known on the Isle of Man for their wonderful musical productions over the last century and more. But they now have a new venture. Chair of the DCU, Gary Corkill, told me more.
Yes, well, a lot of people went to see Hunchback, very successful. One of the highlights of Hunchback was the onstage choir that we formed specifically for that performance. And after the show, a lot of the members of the choir who had not been in a musical theatre production before loved the whole thing about being part of a show and being on stage. And they basically said, is there something we can carry on doing? So the committee sort of got together and we thought we'd try and set up a DCU members choir just to keep the momentum for these new people going for a little bit longer.
So this is something of a new initiative for the DCU then?
Yes, it is. It's something certainly we haven't done in my lifetime with the DCU, and it's going quite well.
So I believe there is a concert coming up then?
Yes, so since the end of February, after the show, we've been rehearsing weekly, and we've got about 25-30 members that are coming, and we thought we'd finish off the 3-month session that we've had with a little concert at St Ninian's Church.
Sounds splendid. And this is going to be open to all?
It's open to anybody. It's on Friday the 8th of July, starting at 7:30, and as I said, at St Ninian's Church.
What sort of uptake, because it is something new, has there been a really good uptake within because the society itself is fairly sizable and been around for a long old time. Has there been a really good response to it?
Yes, there has. We've got a mixture of people that were in the choir. We've got some of the cast, but we've also attracted a number of new people just purely from the fact that it's a choir singing musical theatre numbers. So yes, we've been quite pleased with the uptake.
So do you have to be a DCU member to join the choir?
No, you don't. We said it was open to anybody that wanted to just basically sing musical theatre.
So if people go along to the concert, what sort of stuff can they expect to hear? Well,
a range of musical theatre classics. We've also got a few pop songs we've thrown in. So we're doing a few musical numbers from musicals that you won't see on the Isle of Man, plus some favourites. So that might range from Queen, The Greatest Showman, Wicked, a bit of Stevie Wonder. So really a cross-section of items.
Something for everyone.
Yes, it is.
We should mention as well that it's going to be raising money for the DCU charity, which has a good purpose. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yes, the charity was formed about 8 to 10 years ago, and it's really aims to promote musical theatre. And one of the specific aims is to assist and encourage individuals to enhance their studies in arts and theatres, whether that be on stage or backstage or production. So the charity the money from the concert is going towards our charity, and specifically we award a bursary every year to one or more of our young people to go away and further their studies. And the concert will also include items from 3 of our previous recipient award winners.
And it is amazing, actually. I mean, perhaps Sam Barks is very high profile, but the number of people from the island who have gone through organisations like the Douglas Choral Union, like the Operatics or Tellurian or some of these other groups, and have actually gone on to star in pretty big shows and on, quite literally, on the international stage.
Yes, there has. If you look through some of the cast lists, certainly in the West End, there are Manx men and women plying their trade, as you say, week in, week out.
Is it too late for us?
I think so.
Just give us those dates again then. Concert coming up. It's, like I said, if you like songs from the shows, good popular numbers, it's going to be definitely up your street, raising money for the charity we've heard there to help with performers and people coming from the Isle of Man, going through the likes of the DCU, and who knows where they might end up if they go onto musical theatre school and such like. So just give us those times and dates again and how you can get a ticket.
So again, it's Friday the 8th of July, 7:30 at St Ninian's Church. It's just £5 to get in. You can book tickets through Eventbrite, and you can find that link on our social media page on Facebook, Douglas Choral Union, or you can contact me on 498 773. And there will be tickets on the door if you just want to turn up. And we will, as part of that concert, provide some refreshments at the end to give everybody an opportunity to do what Manx people do best, which is have a chat.
So this Friday, 7:30, St Ninian's Church. Get yourself there. A great night guaranteed. Tickets on the door if you want to take potluck and turn up on the night for last minute. A great sing, and as Gary says, you can catch up on the crack. Poetry time. We hear works from the current Manx bards, Owen and Eva, here on Spotlight every month. The full bard, the youth bard, both very good bards. This month it's Eva's turn, and we'll let her introduce her piece herself.
Hello! So I'm back on Spotlight. This week's poem is quite an educational one. I wrote it a while ago, just on the spur of the moment. In fact, I think it's the poem which took me the least amount of time to compose. So I've always been fascinated by different periods in history, specifically the Victorian era. And what I love about this poem is both its historical nature and cyclical structure, meaning it begins and ends in a similar way. Upon further attention to detail, I recognise how the Victorian era represented in my poem links to the contextual setting of Great Expectations, the novel by Charles Dickens, which I'm currently studying for English literature. And just a small warning before I begin. This poem contains topics which may be upsetting to some. Without further ado, scrawling streets. Water drained away from the land, every last ounce covered by sand. Drafts sweep the crops on fields and destroy hard laboured for yields. Pockets empty, purses sagging, money through the gutters dragging. Houses lying abandoned and derelict, waiting for the last owners to evict. On every corner and market square, humans begging for what they dare, crawl upon their hands and knees orphaned, parents killed by authorities, scavenging for useless morsels of food, praying to a god in his protective hood, clothes tattered and ripping at the seams, flesh disintegrating as do their dreams. They've lived through deadly sicknesses, survived through full lockdown pandemics, yet the streets wear and tear them away as hungry street dogs may rip up meat tray. Trodden underfoot by all passers-by, scorned by wealthy merchants dry, spat at and ridiculed criminals, convicts, the deranged fortune teller predicts. Both hands lying on a glittered globe, they'll stay treading on the royal robe, the streets their home now for evermore, unable to escape the dregs of being poor. Exploited of every last human dignity, stripped down to skin and bones, gritty, and against these shadowy walls cornered, kidnapped, trafficked, raped, and murdered. No signs to display danger, beware, frightful scenes giving a dark glare, bloodstains to an ancient history, gunshots ring out, an unsolved mystery. A pickpocket racing through the tides, thieving scoundrels and rebels besides, inhumanly chained by feet and hands, barreled compactly with RATs in the stands, taken to slave upon a foreign plantation, which destroys every coming generation. Yet still not a drop of water thrives upon the dry tongues of wilting lives.
Eva Petrova, the Manx youth bard. I wish I'd been that kid before I was out of my teens. Also her fearlessness to tackle the darkest of topics, any topic. More from Eva in a month's time. Speaking of poetry, as I'm sure you do all the time being regulars on Spotlight, if you're a budding poet or indeed a regular writer of poetry but never really take the plunge to get it out there to the great unwashed, this year's Poetry Trail might be just what you're looking for. Here's the Isle of Man Poetry Society Chair, Bethany deLeigh Runciman.
Yes, this is about my 8th one I think I've done. I've just run a children's poetry trail as well for the first time this year. The Isle of Man Poetry Trail, if you don't know anything about it, it is in effect a poetry competition. And then we have 20 winning poems, which then are printed onto beautiful yellow A4 posters. And these are displayed in the windows of shops and cafes or libraries in Douglas Town Centre, Ramsey, and this year in Port Erin as well. So the poems must be less than 25 lines long, excluding the title. People can submit up to 3 poems. It's open to residents in the UK as well as the Isle of Man, and you don't have to be a member of the Poetry Society to submit a poem. The closing date I've extended because I've been on holiday and I've had COVID.
Oh.
So the closing date now is the 11th of July. But if you desperately want to get a poem in and it's just after the 11th, please contact me because it'll be okay. To get an entry form, either email myself at bethany@manxcat.org.uk or go on Facebook and put in Isle of Man Poetry Society with Isle of Man, all long letters. Yes, and then the poems will be judged in end of July, and then I've got Carol Ellis and Hilda Sethner, who are poets, great poets themselves. They're going to judge, and then in August we have a chap called Tony Garland, who is a designer and printer. So he produces the poems, the posters, and then they will go up in Douglas Town Centre from the 23rd of September to the 28th of October. So there's plenty of time to go and see them. And you can get a trail guide from the libraries, Douglas, Ramsey, Port Erin libraries.
And the poems themselves, they can be about any topic you fancy?
Yes, any topic, but just make sure that they are on public display. So just make sure they are okay for that. But any topic, yes, we've had all sorts of topics in the past, from dog poo.
Well, that's great.
Yes, we've had COVID, obviously, and yes, anything. A lot of the poems are about the Isle of Man and how beautiful the Isle of Man is. We have funny poems, sad poems, happy poems, short poems, long poems. I've seen just about everything in the years I've been doing it. Also, I'm looking for a few more poets to enter the competition. So if you think, I'll see if what happens, just please enter. There's also something going on this Friday, Saturday and Sunday. It's the Isle of Man Flower Festival. It's called The Spirit of Man this year. There are 30 organisations taking part in St John's Mill, which is just by the side of Tynwald Mills. And the Poetry Society have a poetry wall in the quiet room upstairs. There's 10 poems which I've selected, which reflect the Isle of Man and flowers, and that's up there for anybody to come and have a look at. It's free entry as well, and there's lovely refreshments available, I know.
What's not to like, as they say.
Yes.
Is it a good chance then, you think, something like the Poetry Trail, if someone's, maybe a budding poet, perhaps they've sort of written a few bits and pieces at home but never had anything published, never read their poems out loud. Is this a good way to get going, do you think?
Oh, it is. Well, for example, last year there was certainly, out of the 20 winning poets, there was certainly about 8 who had never put a poem in anywhere before, and it really is. I mean, it surprises me as to the talent a lot of these poets have. I mean, we have one lady who won last year. She'd never submitted anything, and she did a beautiful poem about the Ferry Bridge, and she's joined the society now, and she's just put in 3 poems into this year's Poetry Trail.
What a great way to get your work out there. Also, a splendid community arts project. If you want to get involved, as Bethany says, you can email her with your poem, bethany@manxcat.org for more details, or you can go to Facebook, look for the Isle of Man Poetry Society and get all the details of how to enter there. I might even enter one myself. Keep it clean, she said, didn't she? That's about it for this week. Don't forget, if you want to hear anything again, go to manxradio.com and download the Spotlight podcast. Listen at your leisure. Drop me a line with any artistic thoughts or ideas. Stay creative. Why not write a poem or two? I'll see you next week. Cheerio.